Who is the space? The other interesting thing about this space, we will get to the point in a minute.
Do
the other,
that.
but this is kind of the point, right, of this podcast. The other interesting thing about this space is it used to be a place called the Exploratory, which was the Science Learning Centre. And I grew up in Bristol, so when I was 7, 8, I don't know, this is where we would come and play with all the science experiments. So it's what got me into science and technology in the first place as well. Didn't look like this, it looked very different back then, but it's the same space. And I kind of, yeah, so it definitely has a lot of threads, a lot of full circle movements for me, this particular space.
Definitely, and yeah, my kids sort of go to Read the Curious now, which is also an amazing,
Yeah.
inspiring place to get kids into science. Isn't it?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we are lucky here.
Oh, we are. Yeah, and there's definitely a focus on the science, the technology, the engineering. And actually, I should probably just say the reason this is the engine shed is because it's kind of attached to the train station, and we have a big history of engineering here, especially with Brunel, and people will probably be familiar with the suspension bridge, but also, yeah, Brunel built the railways, and so, yeah, engineering in Bristol is really something that goes hand in hand. And like I said, having grown up here, that's what you get, you know,
Drilled into you.
taught, yeah, drilled into you. So that probably has influenced a lot of my pathway as well.
It did. And let's talk a bit about the podcast
Yes.
because obviously we've taken a bit of a break from our founder stories,
Yeah.
but we're coming back with lots of amazing ideas for this year, including obviously doing Founded and Grounded Live, and we're going to be calling it The Grounding.
Yeah.
So this is The Grounding Live. And yeah, talk to me a bit about the thought process behind it.
Yeah, I think it came off the back. You and I were we had lunch, right? Yeah, we had lunch right before Christmas, and I think reflecting on just life and everything, and the idea that kind of the things that are going on in the world are impacting us. And then we were having interesting conversations about the things we wanted to do, as well as just those bigger things that are going on in the world and how they impact us, and wanting to be able to respond in more kind of real time, because I think the founder stories love doing that. We're not deviating
No.
from that, but they're very evergreen. They're very even though those founders, they will evolve, they will move along, but they're still very representative of like that founder's journey at that point in time, which could be relevant to founders over any period of time. So, and they don't allow for us to go, oh, like, have you seen what's just in the news right now, and what's just been going on at Davos, and how are they talking about things, or whatever else is going on. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I think we know that all of those things impact founders, and they impact us, and so being able to have a forum where we can discuss that and hopefully share our views and use that as a way to connect with and help the other founders who are part of this community.
100%. So it's about reacting to what's happening in the ecosystem right here, right now, and obviously live as well, which is
Yeah.
amazing. And then kind of a secondary benefit was we get lots of requests for people asking to come for coffee,
Yeah.
grab a chat, and that can get quite exhausting at times, if I'm being quite frank.
Yeah.
And that is one of the biggest benefits about running a podcast is that access to some amazing, incredible minds. But it's like trying to fit it all in.
Yeah.
So the whole point of this as well, we will be inviting external people to come and get on the mic live with us
Yeah.
and have a chat about what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited for that. And I think obviously this is well, this is kind of the first one of these we've done. This is the first one you'll be hearing on the main podcast. So we wanted to, we've got things we want to talk about, and we wanted to kind of make sure that this is all working and that the live is working and everything else. And you can catch this live if you are listening to it. Not live right now, but do keep up with our socials because we'll let you know when we're going live. And yeah, so being able to then invite other people on, I think it's really great. And sort of again coming back to why do I like doing podcasts? Because you can have those chats that you might not also be able to find time for in your schedule elsewhere. And maybe that sounds bad, but yeah, I get to talk to you more than I talk to other people in the ecosystem because we do this together, and so I wanted it'd be nice to bring in some of those other people who are also doing interesting things across the ecosystem. We've used the word ecosystem loads already today.
Yeah.
Sorry, I hope it doesn't sound too. Yeah, whatever.
Talking of ecosystems, though, I just wanted to share a quick good news story. So,
Mm.
one of our previous guests, True Start Coffee,
Yeah.
they just announced their Series A, and they've been going for 10 years.
Ah.
They haven't taken any outside investment, and they came on the podcast. Elena came on it back in 2021,
Yeah.
5 years ago, and they just announced an £8 million round,
Right.
which is incredible. Like, and I love hearing about that. And one of the
Yeah.
things is, I think with the podcast, we've stayed away from inviting founders who've already told their story to come back on, but through this new vehicle, which is the grounding, then we can come and chat to other people and get founders to come back
Yeah.
on, and also not just founders, people from the ecosystem, said it again, in terms of maybe investors, operators, people that aren't directly founders themselves.
Yeah. Oh, that's great news and how interesting. I just want to say to kind of any other founders out there, doesn't that also prove that you don't have to like take these very traditional journeys? And if anyone ever turns around and says to you, oh, if you don't raise any money in the first 2 years, then there's no point doing it. It's like, no, each business has its own pathway, and that's so interesting that they're at Series A this far in. And of course, they're a really well-known brand at this point. They've got big partnerships. You'll find them in many of your supermarkets.
Yes.
So that's great news.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd love to give a quick shout out to that. And I posted a video yesterday featuring one of their ads quite a few years ago. Yeah, so just running around the harborside, which is quite funny. So if you want a laugh at my expense, go and check that out.
Well, that brings us on to something else that's kind of in the news at the moment. Were you trying to get a six-pack quickly by running around Harborside, Ollie?
Definitely not a six-pack. Yeah, no. Maybe just maintain a bit of balance. But do go on.
Well, we were just having a little bit of a giggle at the Anthropic ad, which I don't know if you've all seen it yet, but if you haven't, it's really funny because essentially it's a guy trying to get a six-pack, and then somebody else comes along and is like, "Do you want to have a six-pack quickly?" And it's meant to be having a bit of a laugh at ChatGPT, and it's hilarious because it does everything that ChatGPT does. Yeah, and this whole the inflating of the ego, and it's like perfect. Yeah, we can get you a six-pack. And so it's this whole thing of Anthropic really positioning itself as the ethical AI company, which is what we're kind of seeing going on at the moment.
Yeah, and the second bit to it is obviously them saying that they're not gonna. The ad goes on to talk about get a 10% discount with XYZ, and it's obviously there's going to be a lot of marketing and promotion that comes from certain AI platforms.
Yeah.
Which it's not a new thing in terms of a concept like SEO, isn't it? It's kind of similar.
We're used to ads on our platforms, but I think it's a pattern we've seen before, right, on things. So this is kind of responding to the fact that ChatGPT has announced that it's going to be putting ads on its lowest tier tariff, when it's free in its first tariff tiers, and so this idea, I don't, like you said, I think we all saw it coming. I don't think that's a surprise. Apparently they're not going to be selling data, but Facebook. So we've kind of been through this journey already with the social media platforms, I think, more than anything else. And I just think what's dangerous about this, as far as I'm concerned, is even though we can sit and laugh at an ad, we know already that these platforms are very manipulative. They can get in the minds of people very quickly, that there's been psychosis caused off the back of it. And you're thinking, okay, well, you've got all of these things that are going on that are infecting minds. I can't help but think about kind of young minds as well, and how children use this, or teenagers.
There was a big stat the other day. I don't know what the actual stat was. I think it's about a third of young people that are using AI as a companion tool.
Yeah.
Which is pretty staggering.
Exactly. And quite frankly, in some ways, the least scary thing is being like sold something without realizing you're being sold it, but still that's, it's still manipulation, and it's, yeah, I find it scary, and I really think, and of course, like I said, Anthropic are there kind of painting themselves as whiter than white, and there's never going to be ads on Claude and everything else, and I use Claude more than I use, in fact, I've kind of come off ChatGPT for a while now, and
What were the reasons for that? Apart from the obvious ones.
I thought it was really bad.
Yeah, fair.
I don't want to be an average person
Yeah,
in
yeah.
most of the stuff I do, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not against using AI tools. It's about getting the right tools in the right workflows.
Yeah.
But I was like, this isn't working for me, and I actually was starting to do the therapy thing a little bit with it,
Really?
where I
Yeah,
go
yeah.
on and like start talking to it about things, and I was like, this is making me like, my mind feels more exhausted after these conversations. It hasn't actually helped me move through anything. And then when I'm using it for things like, I don't know, content, or even to, if you do it to review a document or something like that, I was like, it's just not. Content sounds rubbish.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like me. And then
Hallucinating as well?
yeah, lots of hallucinating. And I think in general I could tell when it's hallucinating, but I mean, you only know what you know, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. And so it's quite hard to validate that. And then, but the most important thing actually, then the reason I use it less and less, and if you can see me today, I actually have like a notebook and a pen here. It's because it was getting in the way of my own process of thinking, of creating.
That's the danger, isn't it? When it
Yeah.
interrupts your critical thinking.
Absolutely. And I think that then, like I said, I found it very exhausting, and I wasn't getting closer to feeling clarity or creation or insight. I was feeling further from that actually. So that's what it is for me, is I really want to, there are times when you need to go through this process, and I think as founders in particular, I was working with a group yesterday, and we were talking about, the really fundamental core things. These are very early stage founders who are really trying to figure out their value proposition, the core offering, like what does the market need? And again, sure, there's analysis tools that might be helpful with that. You got to do some of that thinking if that's your business that you're running. And I've seen a couple of founders be getting really burnt out and really struggling with even articulating what they do and being confident about what they do as a business, and how they talk about it and how they represent themselves to different people. And I was like, and it turns out that they've been really using ChatGPT to be like, oh, this is what we do as a business.
And it sounds too polished as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not you should be able to describe your business in 6 different ways.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Have the same outcome, the same transformation, the same value proposition, but be able to do it off the cuff and use different adjectives and variables, and that's what makes us human, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're making me think about something else we said we were going to talk about today.
What was that?
Well, we both went to a storytelling event yesterday.
We did.
Yeah. So myself and Ross Exton, who's founder of Watch and Learn Productions, we did a session on storytelling, and that's a lot of what was coming out of it actually was, how do we tell stories in a really human way, and how do we use that in our businesses? And the whole session, and actually you did the session, so I'm going to ask you about this, but we had this really lovely moment because we had a bunch of different exercises we were doing with people, and again, it was all paper and pen, and nobody was on their devices, and I just looked out over the room, and everyone was like sitting there writing with their paper and pen, and it was a really lovely moment. It felt like such a grounded moment, talking about the grounding, and yeah, there was such a nice energy, and everyone was kind of able to then articulate things about whatever story they wanted to tell. But how was that for you to be this, like, we gave you that exercise to sit down and write things down on pieces of paper?
I think the point was it got everyone thinking, right? Rather than relying on taking a few notes. Actually, the best way of learning is by doing.
Yes.
I think rings true for everybody, right? So I think if you're doing an exercise and trying to come up with an outcome using a framework, then that's when value's delivered. So I think everyone walks away from it with something tangible or knowing a couple of snippets or bits of wisdom that they can implement in their own business. So I think particularly origin stories, obviously we tell a lot of them on Family Grounded. But I think a lot of people do potentially shy away from it. And I think the reasons for that is they don't want to be judged, they don't want to be misconstrued, they're afraid about maybe damaging their reputation. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to talk about the harder parts of your journey or your upbringing or how you got to where you are now. So yeah, I think it helps people with that quick exercise to take that helicopter view and just go, what are the key points that I want to get across in this story, and take it out that subjectivity because you're very close to your own origin story.
Yeah. Should we define story? I realised we did that at the beginning of the session yesterday. So I think that's
what's your definition?
Yeah. So I think it's anything that takes somebody through on a journey. So there's some kind of transition, and we're saying people kind of say beginning, middle, end is often related to the idea of story. I'm always I go back to just being a child whenever I think of story, which I think is really nice because again it reminds us of who we are as humans. And for me, when I think about story, I think about my dad telling me about him and his siblings when he was a child. And so he used to, I mean, sometimes he would read us bedtime stories, but at bedtime he would come up and we would say, like, tell us about that time that, and he would tell us these stories and they'd be funny and like they'd be a bit naughty because it was about like my aunties and uncles when they were teenagers. And I said that notion of like by sort of telling somebody about a journey or some kind of arc, some kind of transition, it actually connects us. And I think it's those two things together that make storytelling really powerful and such an important tool for founders.
Yeah, I think there was a few examples shared in the workshop. I think as soon as somebody's talking about an issue that you can relate to or a circumstance that you can relate to, then you've got their attention, right? That it's gonna stick out.
Yeah. I can't help thinking whenever I think about storytelling, I just think about Hobbit, or Lord of the Rings. I'm like, we talked about heroes' journeys and things yesterday, which I'm not going to go into further today, but yeah, that notion of, and I think again it's because The Hobbit was the first thing I ever read, and um, that fantasy piece I think is something too, and I think so. There's a healing thing in storytelling as well, which for me stories were always an escape, and it was always this like again creating little bubbles for ourselves, but being able to step away from maybe some of the things that are going on in the world, and we can step back, and there's some comforting in that.
I would say it's my favourite time of day with my kids, like just reading them like bedtime stories. So we alternate to my son and my daughter and my wife each night, so we kind of take it in turns to read to both of them, and that's like just that period of relaxation and just spending quality time with them, and it's like I think that I look forward to.
And yet, all of us are in our day-to-day lives running around being like, how do we use AI to make us as productive as possible with everything we do? And you just think, hang on, where are these really valuable moments or turning points? Like, what are the most important things in your business? Yes, there's things, there's tools that can help with the day-to-day grind, and that part is important. But also, like, where are those moments that actually make this worthwhile?
And talking of tools, because we spoke about obviously AI tools. I think the problem that Founders has is it's moving at such a quick pace of change. Like, do you get founders coming to you saying, what tools should I be using? Like, what's the latest thing? Like, how do you keep up with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to be very decisive about it, and I think you have to decide on your principles around it. And I think this is something that is still in the early stages. I there's several people in the ecosystem who it's like drink every time we say ecosystem. Although Ollie and I are on the Lucasade and Red Bulls, so I mean we will drink. So of people who really position themselves as AI experts, and so I certainly try and make sure that I'm engaged with those people, and I like to hear what they've got going on. At the same time, I try and do as much reading as I can and stay up to date with things. And founders, well, interestingly enough, yeah, there's kind of two sides to the coin with the founders. So you have one side where they're actually like, oh, last summer I spent a while playing with some agents and I realized I could build this thing which would help out a business I knew, and suddenly this is turning into a business. So you have that side where people have really played with the tools already.
Experimentation.
Yeah. Which in terms of practical usage of the tools, I think that's what you've got to do, right? You've got to carve out a bit of time and play with it and figure out what works for you. In terms of, and then it's the flip side of that, which is people who are doing something that's got nothing to do with any of this, and they'll be using it for, well, the obvious ones, so things like meeting notes and that kind of thing. And
Summarising documents.
yeah, exactly. So, and I think the big conversation that is most important to me is around the ethics of it. Particularly important for founders is the data of your clients or the data of the stakeholders who are around you. And I think you've got to be extremely aware of that. And I'm not running a high-tech, high-growth startup myself at the moment, but even doing consultancy work, and I work with people who have things that can't be
commercial
shared.
IP.
Yeah, exactly. And certain sectors that I work in as well, where there's a lot of security around it, and you've got to be really careful. And so, can we trust these tools is a big thing that is on my mind, and I'm continually evolving the toolkit I use for that. And that's why I encourage people to be thinking about. So I do think we've got to do some mindful implementation.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's like, on two sides of the coin there, you've got the experimentation, have a play, experiment, have fun, try and build something using agents. Then on the other side, very serious data security, IP, commercial, stuff that's going to be sensitive. And how do you balance all of that? I listened to a great, I don't actually find time to listen to many podcasts actually, but I listened to a great podcast called The Shell Game. Basically, it's a guy who's built an AI business using AI agents, and he's taking you through the journey of building it. And it's crazy the things they're doing. They're like bringing up people and hiring interviews, these agents, and getting things really wrong, but he's sharing the whole journey. It is just hilarious.
Yeah. Maybe that is if you can be transparent and go through that experimentation in a way that's really transparent, then that's great too, right? And I feel like then that's perfectly ethical in the sense of you're not playing with other people's data, or you're not, or perhaps you're not promising customers something that's going to work when it might not work, or it's going to destroy the reputation of those customers because it goes wrong.
Exactly. And he's very clear that the tools that they use in that, they're not, they've got time partnerships with them to be able to use them. And he's talking about the good bits and the bad bits as well, which is important. It's a balanced view.
Yeah. I've actually just taken on a new role, which I'll talk more about once I've actually signed everything on the dotted line. But it's going to be this is basically the whole focus of it. And I've got at least the next 2 years to be looking at this conversation that we're having. So
revisiting this in a future episode.
Yeah, and kind of doing it out loud a little bit more, I think, is going to be really important.
Talking of that, because I think there's a big movement in the founding community. Like, people don't want to hear your marketing; they want to hear your thinking.
Yeah.
And like building in public isn't necessarily a new thing, but it's about keeping yourself accountable. If you're doing that in a public setting, then I think it's great for looking back as well. That's why I love doing this.
Absolutely. So this comes back to a conversation that you and I have had already, which is also about that, being uncomfortable in order to expand. And so that idea of putting yourself out there when you are exploring and doing that and going, but who am I to talk about this? Or who am I, actually you're everyone, because everyone needs to be talking about, technology, AI, that's something that impacts everybody now. And so actually we do need to be having the conversation. You shouldn't have to be an expert to have the conversation.
No.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of retained knowledge through your